Okay, welcome to MUFON Los Angeles. My name's Steve Murillo. I'm the State Section Director here at MUFON LA, and happy holidays. We have a very, very interesting speaker tonight. His name is Brett Lueder, and Brett hails to us from Chico, California. He is a journalist to the core, and he has written several books. One of the books he's written is A UFO Hunter's Guide, but he didn't write that book. He didn't set out to write a UFO book. He set out to be a journalist and then got hooked on this subject. And then all of a sudden, and through the research of a journalist, came up with some revelations and some ideas and some thoughts that were worth putting down on paper and sharing with you tonight. He's appeared on George Norrie. The first time ever that they had him on actually for 3 hours. Interview and then 3 hours of talk show, and that's how he came to our attention, because the MUFON Orange County speaker coordinator heard him and said, "This guy's really powerful. We should bring him on." So we reached out to him, and here he is tonight. So without any further ado, he's been standing patiently. I'd like to introduce Brett Lueder.
So tonight, first of all, I'm very honored to be here. I find myself in a kind of a weird situation. People call me a ufologist now because I've written this book. I find that strange. Some people consider that a derogatory term. I don't myself, but nonetheless, I feel weird about it. But I do think I've written a really good book, and I got approached by Victoria Jack of the Bay Area UFO Expo. Ruben Uriarte had turned down the book, and then John Rhodes turned it down. I guess a wiser editor had come to her and asked her who could write a UFO book. So when Vicki Jack asked me to do it, I had literally been studying heavily UFO books, conspiracy books, spirituality, all different secret societies, what that's all about, for about 12 years. I couldn't have planned it better than this. I was so prepared to write this book. And then the nice people at Weiser said I could do whatever I wanted. So I kind of sat back and thought, well, God, it sucks waiting around for the government to try to tell us anything. They're not going to do it. Some of the governments are coming forward with stuff, but if you study conspiracy at all, you know that the governments now are all corporations, and they all have agendas, and they don't necessarily want free energy machines or the knowledge of other life, what that would do to our society to come about. So I don't really think we can rely on that. So I thought, why not empower people with the knowledge and the confidence to go out and start doing this stuff themselves. I talked with Rick earlier about sky watching, and Rick couldn't believe I'd seen so many UFOs, and well, you literally have to watch. You can't start talking to people while you're camping. You got to sit and watch. You can still talk, but you've got to watch. And what I do is I just let my eyes go diffuse, and I inevitably pick up movement. The most thing I see is what looks like satellites, but then you watch them further and they'll flare up, or they'll curve, or they'll change speeds, and you know that's not a satellite. So I don't know what it is. Maybe it's an atmospheric being of some kind. Trevor James Constable first brought that forward, and of course rods have been discovered now. So it gives me the impression that our atmosphere is really just another form of an ocean, and there's probably thousands of creatures up there that we haven't discovered yet. So I think that kind of confuses a lot of us about what a UFO is. So I put the book together in such a way that I encapsulated most of the big kind of chunks of the history for the short attention span. And then I was very lucky to get most of the big names in ufology to contribute tips. So if you're nervous about doing an interview of a witness, gosh, I've got probably 10 different tips from people like Jenny Randalls or Stanton Friedman, or Ruben Uriarte gave a great interview tip. Melinda Leslie, people like this. So it's like you're new, you're out there, you have a question about what's going on. The book kind of enables you to have one of these guys take you under their wing and kind of tell you what they would do in that situation. I don't think that's not in any other book. But there's a big story behind the making of this book. It didn't just happen. And that's what I'm going to get into now. I'm going to kind of unveil my worldview and then drop a ufologist into that context and discuss some of the ramifications of that. And then I'll finish with my first case. And I've only done one case. I don't really have a lot of field experience, but I have sure read a lot of books. And I've interviewed a lot of people. And I've get my DVD set back there. I spent 4 years at the Bay Area UFO Expo interviewing as many speakers that would talk to me on film about a wide variety of subjects and just slapping them together in collections of interviews. Lots of good information. So, but I'm a journalist. I got a degree from journalism at Chico State University in 2000, and I proceeded to write about music around town. And after writing about music in several of the local papers, and then I made my way into Magical Blend magazine, writing about music. And anyone familiar with Magical Blend magazine? Sandra, of course. Okay. I began to see a pattern when I would talk to these roots reggae guys, like Bob Marley. You guys all familiar with Bob Marley? Okay, good. He would practice a kind of music called roots reggae. And it's a very spiritual kind of music, and they use a specific kind of rhythm that's meant to shamanically unlock consciousness so that the singers then can imbue the listeners with alternate knowledge that you wouldn't normally get. Because in fact, they believe, without reading books, that the news is full of crap, and that the powers that be are lying to us on multiple levels. But I began to see a pattern. These roots reggae guys, Burning Spear was a great one. Brad McDonald from the Wailing Souls, Luciano, Aston Family Man Barrett was the bass player for Bob Marley. They call him the Family Man, the keeper of the rhythm, because he was literally the shaman in control of the rhythm. It wasn't Bob, it was really Aston, the bass player. And so they began to describe an alternate view of the world. And it started to strike me that this is the same kind of thing that people like, we'll say Graham Hancock and Fingerprints of the Gods, or Jose Arguelles and the Mind Factor, and then later I read Robots Rebellion by David Icke, and of course I got into some Jordan Maxwell stuff pretty heavily. They were all saying the same things from two different cultural vantage points, and I was really fascinated by that. And, I'm just a guy in college sitting in my room reading a bunch of books, so I figured the thing that would be most fun to do is start cross-referencing stuff. So this is what's led to this book, and I'll talk more about cross-referencing and the things that are cross-referenced in that book towards the end of the talk tonight. But it's basically about the role of the roots reggae Rasta, as I define in the book, in terms of a global struggle for the control of human consciousness. Because I'm of the opinion that there is no conspiracy, that slowly over time, maybe thousands of years, depending on how far back you want to go, we've slowly given up our power little by little. And this is why we need things like government, because we don't think we can handle ourselves, so we put that charge in someone else's lap. But in the end, my opinion is that as a society, we've kind of lost touch with who we are. And so that's why I called my lecture, Who Am I and Why Am I a Ufologist? I've kind of determined that because, at least in the West more so, we've lost more touch with our spirituality, we tend to develop things to help teach us about ourselves, because we're really just like an Indian. We're all human still. So I look at ufology now as kind of a Western form of shamanism, because it really brings you, it puts you on the fast track towards knowledge, which is enlightenment, and knowing who you are. And anyone who's had contact will tell you that there's, maybe not anyone, but a lot of people say there's a spiritual component to the UFO enigma. And I think that's because, and I think Jacques Vallée would agree, that we've lost touch with ourselves, and at least in Vallée's opinion, we will project things out of our mind that are going to teach us about ourselves, and he calls it an evolutionary control system. But I'll get to that book a little bit later. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But in that book, I unveil my worldview. This is basically it, that human beings are in a magical universe, and that we are born of magic and born to create magic, born to manifest our futures using magical tools. These are the three tools that I have determined, and if anyone disagrees, please shoot it at me, because I'd love to debate about this stuff. All religions, all secret societies, all tribes, indigenous shamanic traditions use these three tools. And upon reflection, I was able to determine that human beings use these three tools every second of every day. It's how we manifest each next moment or each next event in our lives. And I've studied many different spiritual traditions, and all of them share this. But if anyone knows of something that doesn't, let me know, because I think I can describe any situation in these three terms. It's not the only way to look at the world, but it's one way to look at the world. And I'll talk about cultivating your magical lens here in just a little bit, because I think when you see the world in terms of magic, in terms of ritual, symbolism, and intention, and how you use those three tools, this is my definition of magic. It's how a consciousness uses the three tools. First, they use it to interact with the universe, with our external environment. We're constantly using symbols, and then acting out those symbols with intentions, and the acting out is the ritual. Okay, and we also use the three tools to interact with ourselves. So any type of a meditative technique, all the way from just a simple altered state in maybe at a music concert, all the way up to the activation of a Merkaba, which is supposedly the highest form of consciousness. Those three tools, different forms, different stylized forms. Of course, all these have broken off into different cultural forms that we see around the world. And of course, this is how I'm interacting with you right now. I'm speaking word symbols back with a certain intention. The act of speaking and standing here speaking is the ritual. I at least can view it that way, and that's how I do. And I can explain everything in the world in terms of these three tools. That's valuable for reasons I'll get to in a moment. But cultivating your magical lens, now, if you see the world metaphorically, you're doing that. If you see it symbolically, you're doing that. If you see it ritually, you're doing that. If you see the world in terms of protocols or methodologies, what you're witnessing is magic. That's the usage of ritual, symbolism, and intention for any protocol or methodology you can think of. If you see the world in terms of polarities, man and woman, day and night, positive and negative, money plays a big part in our lives. Is it a coincidence that our accounting has a positive and a negative on it? No, because this money is what's used to ritually harvest our energy in this ritual of society. And it's by design. It's not by coincidence. And then, of course, the big one, which will play a role tonight, is if you view the world in terms of bindings, which is what they call it in magic, magical bindings. You cast a spell on somebody, that's a binding. But in the material world, it's called a contract. And after studying several different kinds of spiritualities, I realized that some of the rules of magic are exactly what the rules of contracts are in the UCC, which is the Uniform Commercial Code. That's no coincidence. We're magical beings living in a magical world. I think this is why they've demonized that symbol that we call magic, that word magic, because they don't want us to know this basic thing that's going on. Now, this is basically what it is. Magic equals contracts, it equals law, and that's what governs all of our lives. All of our law is done by contract, and this affects us in every aspect of our lives. We keep asking questions. Why are there no more rights? Why do the cops pull us over without a victim? And they call speeding a crime, even though it's not really a crime. All this kind of, why are they taxing us crazily? I had the IRS tell me I made $40,000 one year, and that's just a total lie. So I had to deal with that, and I'll get to the IRS here in just a minute. But, you like that one? Okay. I got some stuff about the IRS if you want to hear that. But energy in general, if we can all agree, contract, energy is free-flowing until it is bound. Thoughts bind energy. So if I think of a symbol in my mind, I have bound energy into that symbol. And then words themselves are binding spells. Each symbol, each letter is its own self, started out as a magical symbol somewhere, or developed from a magical symbol. And so when you are writing words, you're literally spelling. It's right in front of our face. I went to spelling bees ever since I was a little kid. I had no idea. I was actually spelling. It's magic. That's what we're doing. We're magical beings in a magical universe. Anyone familiar with Creditors in Commerce? Okay, all right. Gordon Hall, Jack Smith. Good stuff, yeah. The art of the private contract. Little feedback going? Or maybe it's a UFO. Creditors in Commerce, I'm good buddies with Gordon Hall. And he has, although it wasn't new to me, this idea of the public versus the private, he is has clued me into how to use that and view that in a way that is not only advantageous to humans, but as a ufologist. And no one's really tried to use that in ufology yet, but I'll get to that in a little bit too. So, but magic is contracts, which is law. And so Gordon likes to say, if you see anywhere where it says law, down at the courthouse or anywhere, you can substitute that with the word contract, because that's what it all goes by. And the whole world is like that. I mean, literally, if our spirits are energy, then we're free-flowing until what? We are down here by contract. We're bound in the flesh. So we're here by contract. That's at least my supposition. Now, before I get into what I think the terms of my personal contract are, and I think each one of you has terms to why you're down here, these are some of the main magical, spiritual, universal laws. You can get these in a lot of books. Some of the airy-fairy part of my lecture tonight is that you can get a lot of this in books on channeling, channel material, Seth material, Ramtha. I have an article coming out in Britain's Phenomena magazine in the next couple months, where I interviewed Diane Robbins. Anyone familiar with Diane Robbins? She wrote, of course, Sandra, of course. You can just keep your hand down. I know you're familiar with all this stuff. Anyway, Diane Robbins has written a couple books about the inner earth people in the city of Telos beneath Mount Shasta. And she claims to be in contact with a man, an ascended master named Adama, who is supposedly 20,000+ years old. He's from Lemuria, and all the people in the city are from Lemuria. And I got to ask him through Diane about a bunch of universal laws. And I got to ask him about sex, and how do they view sex, and all kinds of good stuff. And so that stuff will be out in Phenomena magazine in the next couple months. I'm not exactly sure when. So it goes into that. I mean, each one of these sheets I could go on for hours. So, but these are the basic magical laws that Druids call it the threefold law. You send out negative intentions on somebody, you work a ritual with negative intentions, or a ritual where all the participants are not willing. In other words, by contract terms, you have to have full disclosure for the contract to work. So for a binding to work, everyone has to know what's going on and then willfully participate in it. Okay? So the threefold law dictates that you send out something negative, it's going to come back on you 3 times. And you see this similar laws in different traditions around the world. Don Miguel Ruiz, The 4 Agreements. Anyone heard of that book? Popular book. You don't send out negative energy. It's just going to come back to you. It's that same kind of thing. 3 times always consecrates. You see this a lot in court. Who has experience in court here? Either legal people or people that have just been busted a lot. Okay, you're my kind of guy. All right. Judges will hit that gavel 3 times. 3 times and you're in contempt, or 3 times, that just means full, that's it right there. It's either initiation or consecration or an ending. And, they wear the black robe. The judges, they're magicians. They handle the symbols and speak a language that we're not familiar with, which is why they have power over us. But we've willfully given them that power. And through creditors in commerce, as I will attest, and maybe our friend back here will attest. I'm sorry, I can't see you. That light is so bright. There you go. Hi there. You can handle this stuff through private contract, and really, when the sovereigns talk about how we're all kings and queens and we're all supposed to have abundance, this is really the way I see how that can happen. It's through private contract. Your notices in place, and then just wait for the public officials to come mess with you because they think they can, and then you just, you lean them up, and there's a whole process to that, which I could go on for hours. And I'm a beginner, by the way, too, so full disclosure is one of the rules, and then you must honor all valid contracts. If you consciously enter into a contract, there's this thing called honor, and you must stay in honor. And dishonor is not good. It's negative energy. So keep your promises if you can. Honor all contracts, and of course respect all life. There's many, many more universal laws, and I talk about some of those in that article that'll come out in Phenomena magazine, which is online. But so here's some of the terms that I think are part of my contract. I'm sure there's going to be other ones. I think we're all here together for some of the similar terms. I think we're all here to learn and grow on whatever level. And so I think that's part of my contract. We're imbued with the intention of creation because that's why we were created, with the intent to create. I like to use the Christian metaphor of God was with the Word, and the Word became creation. It was creation. Well, God has the intention to create. He holds the symbol, which is the Word, in his head, and then he speaks to creation. There's the ritual. And so we are born of the three tools, and we're here to manifest using the three tools, to learn about ourselves through the three tools. And at least part of my terms, not everyone's terms, because that's where we have psychics that seem to see into past lives, but part of my terms is I'm not supposed to know. And it's really frustrating for me, because I really want to know what's going on. And so I think that's what really drives me, is some people these answers just seem to come to them. They can read, I don't know, anyone know Stuart Swerdlow? Montauk Project survivor, okay? He does not claim to be a psychic. He claims to be a mentalist, which is someone who can see someone's blueprint of their future and actually change it. So if we're down here by contract, Stuart is claiming to be able to change that contract. And so when you get into creditors and commerce a bit, you'll see that contracts, in fact, are dynamic, and you can change contracts anytime. This is why you see those sports guys on ESPN all the time who just signed like a 10-year deal for X amount of $1 million, renegotiating in 2 or 3 years. Because you can always just counter-offer somebody. And so in court, what you do, so you don't ever contract with those guys, because those judges are masters at getting you to contract with them, you just counter-offer them all day. They can never get you. It's really simple. So although some philosophers will disagree, I think free will is part of my contract. There's definitely philosophy out there that says that everything is preordained and that there is no free will. But, gosh, I hope that's not true. So I like to think I have free will, and that the more I educate myself, the more I'll be able to make better choices for myself and act out that free will in my own magical life. And then, of course, magic is the method. I mean, that's the tools we've been given to use, is ritual, symbolism, and intention. Everything else comes after that. That's first. And this is open to anybody. If anybody wants to challenge that, please. I will not take that as hostile. Let's debate it. Because I think that's true right there. That has given risen to all language, all science, all music, all culture stems from those three things. And then, I don't know if this is true for everyone, but I think it's true for me. I think I have to do it myself and follow my own heart and do my own homework. And as I do that, it's going to lead me to bigger and bigger groups of people, to where if we're all doing that same thing, we're all going to be able to stand together, and whatever issues are out there, like this government thing or the IRS or China moving in trying to collect on the debt, all that stuff will go away. Peace, war, we'll find the root of all our diseases is mostly toxicity. You know, I just think it's going to be a much better world when we're all on the same page. And even though it will look different to each of us when we're following our hearts, I think it will all lead us to the same place. So each one of you, I think, has got their own terms, so it's up to you to decide what those terms are. So here's basically the situation I find myself in, at least, and the rest of us. We lost knowledge of who we are, and it's put us in quite a pickle. But subconsciously, we want to know. And so whether you want to argue it's a conspiracy or it's an accident or whatever, either way, this is the situation we're in. So because we're magical beings, we inevitably, consciously or subconsciously, will create external magical tools that will help us learn about ourselves. This is known classically as sympathetic magic. And anyone who's interested in studying the history of magic, I would go to Sir James George Fraser's The Golden Bough, all 12 volumes. Nuts what's in there. But it gave me the sense that symbols can be imbued with any energy. So, for example, one tribe might view a woman's menstrual cycle in a very negative way. And so they put the women, poor women, out in a little hut out the outside of the village for that week until the men can deal with them again. But there's other cultures that embrace that. So it's just a matter of what symbols work for you. And so in the bigger picture, what I advocate is that all humans need to figure out what symbols work best for them and then use them. Because we're force-fed symbols all day long. And I'll speak for myself. It's really hard for me. it was hard for me to cultivate focus because I had the TV on, or I had the music on, or I had the radio on. You know, they don't call it a TV program for nothing. And so, my thoughts weren't that strong. And so I found that it was hard to hold the right symbols in my head. And I think this is most evident in society when you look at mortality. When we're little infants, when we first learn our language, whatever culture you're in, you really quickly learn you have a birthday. And then at some point after that, or right there at the same time, you learn that you have a death day. And I remember when I was a kid, I used to have nightmares about dying. And so my take is that was stuck in the back of my head for a long time, which I think it's prevalent around society. It's in most people's heads, which is why they're running around in the rat race trying to get all their money, because they know at some point they're going to die. Well, my take is, why hold that symbol in your head? I think if you do, it takes 70 to 80 years. What's the average lifespan? 75, right over there? For us to kill ourselves with our own thoughts. That's kind of my take. If we hold thoughts of immortality in our head and focus on that heavily and live in the moment, don't think about any of this other stuff, I don't think your cells will degrade. I think we're going to find that the more we can focus on this, the longer people are going to live. And, we've got people in Siberia that are in their 100-teens. Has anyone heard of anyone in their 120s? Well, even the Bible has allotted us 120 years. So, as edited as that thing is, I'm sure we at least got 120. Anyway, that's my take on it. So, we create external tools to help us learn about ourselves. Science is maybe the biggest one. We're constantly relying on science to tell us about who and what we are. DNA is a big thing. But then there's also scholarship too that says that our thoughts can change our DNA, which, it's a quantum universe, right? Our thoughts create the future. Music is another one. I love music. I've maybe learned more abstractness about myself through music than anything else. Interpersonal relationships obviously teach us a lot about ourselves. One's career and jobs, and if you're a ufologist, I think that falls in there for sure. But even if you're a plumber or an electrician or a street sweeper, it's the same thing, but I don't think it's that you're on the fast track. I think ufology in the West, outside of being a shaman or a priest, is the fast track towards self-enlightenment, because it brings you in touch with all these different subjects in a really fast time. Sometimes in just one case. The Bentwaters case crosses all kinds of bridges. And then, of course, we have created government because we got lazy and didn't want to handle our own affairs. And you see this in court again. When you walk in, you hire an attorney. That makes you a ward of the court. Does anyone know what the definition of a ward is? It means you're an idiot. You can't handle your own affairs. Look it up in Black's Law Dictionary. You can't handle your own affairs, so you have to hire this guy that's going to attorn for you. And then one of the definitions of attorney is to give your rights and property over to the state. So your private property over to the public state. And you see I have public written in all caps there. That's for a reason. Do you guys know about the birth certificate? Why are our names in all caps on the birth certificate? Yeah, the straw man, exactly. Okay, that's the public version of us. That's our little voodoo doll that's been created for us. And if we agree that it's us, then they can affect us the public can affect us through the straw man. And I'll get into that in just a bit. But in essence, we're affected by the three worlds: the physical world, the spiritual world, and this fictitious public world, which is really ruling our lives right now outside of the Constitution. That's why we don't have rights anymore. The Constitution's been suspended. I'll be writing about that in my next book. Incidentally, that's volume 2 from Song in Your Heart. It's a 3-part series. I'm sorry I didn't mention that earlier. Volume 2 is going to be called Tales of a Heavy Heart, UFOs, Magic, and Impending Doom. And I will be discussing the law very heavily in that book, and the 3 different worlds. But we need to know who we are in each world and how to deal with each world based on that. And so here's how it basically breaks down. You have a private individual, which is what we all are, but there's also a fictitious or public side of us, which is represented by a bank account and our social security number and an all caps name. And that's our little voodoo doll. It's called the straw man. and you see it in all caps, but there's also a public collective. So earlier I saw John Lears talking about, well, we got to get this out to the public. Well, this is the kind of wordplay they use. That's one definition of public is all of us right here. We're a public. Or society at large is a public. But that's referring to public on the private side. Not to get too confusing. But the public is also the name for the whole fiction that's grafted on top of regular society. It's also known as a state. Of course, George Orwell talked about that in his famous book, 1984. Ayn Rand in Atlas Shrugs goes into it quite a bit. There's a scene in Atlas Shrugs where the guy is debating with the judge, and the judge is trying to stick him into a contract, and the guy won't let him. So, shoot, that book's like 50 years old. So this stuff, it's not new stuff, but it's arcane, and it works because they're actually telling us what's going on. So they're satisfying the universal law of telling us, but we're just lazy. And, and I'll just speak for myself. I was lazy and I did not know. I got brought up in a family that did not know about this stuff. And so I had to discover this on my own. And I'm sure it had nothing to do with all the court appearances I had to make over the years. So as a human going out into the world, or a ufologist going out into the world, these are the 5 areas of protection. You can break these down differently if you want. You could put the mental and emotional together. You could break apart the spiritual and astral because it takes different sets of protocols to access each one. But essentially, these are the five areas. Now, legal, lawful, does anyone know the difference between those two terms? Lawful is organic. Legal is fictitious. And so I learned this from Jordan Maxwell. There's a website out there, and it's been moved. And it used to be US versus USA.html. But it's housed somewhere, and I can't remember offhand where it is, but it shows the lawful terms that the Founding Fathers gave us, and it shows the legal fiction terms, the equivalents. And so for like a birth certificate, that is the beneficiary title. That means that the state owns us. The real live certificate of birth is probably in a basement in the county seat where you were born. And that document's sealed away, just like the Constitution is right now, because it's the public that is taking over. I call it, the public is the corporate fiction that has been developed by government to supposedly help govern, and it is built up on a house of debt, and it's about to die because this debt's gone out of control, and they can't just keep creating money forever, although they apparently think they can. And so when a private person plugs into an office in this public, they have to toe the company line. They're no longer a private person. They're towing the agenda of the public. And now the public is the federal, the state, the county, and the municipal governments all together as one is the public. But then also through banking, Monsanto and all the big companies are all part of the public. So even employees for these big giant corporations are literally holding public offices. And they're private people that change the way they think when they hold their jobs. And, recently in California, we just somehow did not pass the no GMO thing, the no labeling thing. I don't know how that didn't happen. Okay, well, so you got families of men and women that work for Monsanto. You plug them into that job, and they're going to toe the company line, GMO, all the way. You pull them out into their private lives, and I think you're going to find a little bit different story. So it's that difference between the public and the private. And then protecting yourself in all the areas, but then, of course, legal, lawful. In terms of the public and private, you got to get your notices in place. You got to notice the right people in the right agencies. And Gordon and Jack go into this a bunch. Creditorsincommerce.com, in case you care. I couldn't recommend that enough. You get the right notices in the right place, and then wait for these people to violate you. And then you just lean them up. And when you lean them up on the UCC, it costs $5 and about 10 minutes of your time. I go to the Secretary of State website, and now these public officers can't work in their job because they have a tag against their insurance bond. And that forces people to act. And the legend of Gordon Hall is he got himself out of prison by posting his own bond. He, according to his story, Rules of the Game of Life is the introductory audio. He got the warden fired because he took Gordon's chess set. It was Gordon's day to have the chess set in prison. Gordon didn't like that, so he offered the guard an agent of the warden, or a contract, a verbal contract. And we all know about verbal contracts, right? They're just hard to enforce, right? So we don't really take them seriously in everyday life, but Gordon, he'll just lean you up. I don't know how he does it so quick. UCC says you got to give the person 14 days before you can lean them up. Gordon can lean sheriffs up or judges, whatever. They'll try to put him in jail in like 2 days. They're kicking him out because they can't do the job anymore. Gordon's got him leaned up. So I can't stress that enough. As a ufologist, think about the ramifications of this. You're out at Area 51 and the soldiers roll up on you. Private people plugged into public offices. What are they going to do? They're going to steamroll you because they got the guns, right? Well, you kind of got to let them at that stage because they got the guns. But you go home, lean them up, and watch what happens. No one's done this yet in a ufological context, and I hope to be the first. So I hope it doesn't make them want to come after me more, but I'm already studying this stuff, so I think if they really wanted me, they could just come get me anytime. Because if they're going to use guns, that's just in dishonor, and eventually that will come back on them. That's not going to help me in the future if they kill me or my family or anything, but this is a tactic that I think a ufologist can benefit from, especially in the lower levels of government. But I was talking with Steve on the way over, what if we got a general on the private side into a default on a contract, and he's got to divulge information or pay an astronomical amount of money? I don't know what would happen exactly, but I'm going to look into trying to do that and hopefully not get shot. So, okay, that's the situation I find ourselves in. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about more of my path and how I got to the book. As I said before, I'd been studying for about 12 years, reading heavily, all kinds of books. And when I got the opportunity to write a UFO Hunter's Guide, and there's many good reasons why you want to do arduous background research in your field. Just, you want to get the history down, you want to get the modern context. As you do research in any level, it's teaching you more about yourself. But what I learned, and it's definitely played out in my first case, which I'll talk about in a minute, is that arduous background research cultivates the necessary symbols in your mind to foster synchronicity. And man, there's so much information in a UFO Hunter's Guide. Books came out of the woodwork. People would give me books. Victoria Jack, God bless her, she lost her house through this whole mortgage thing, put all her stuff in storage and said, Brett, I want you to hold my books. And wow, the books that, she runs the Bay Area UFO Expo. Every speaker has given her a book, and I had access to all those books, plus all the DVDs. I could never have done that unless this stuff came my way, or at least the book would have been a lot thinner, I think, if this stuff didn't come my way. I could not have afforded all these books, not at my current income. The right interviews would come my way. Our magazines would call wanting a certain article, which is something I'd been working on, but there was no outlet for it, so I kind of let it go. But all of a sudden someone's interested. Wow, now I'm doing this research, and wow, it turned out to be something perfect for what I need for what I'm working on. And so, that's my definition of synchronicity. This is a quote from Jung: temporarily coincident occurrences of acausal events, a little technical. The perception of two or more occurrences that are not causally related, or at least seemingly unlikely to randomly occur together in a significant way. They probably are connected, but because we've lost touch with ourselves, we don't see that connection, and we view it as synchronicity. I kind of think it's really our psychic self, trying to bring us along. And so, this has definitely played out in my first case, which involves UFOs and Bigfoot. But this is a classic quote I got from Wisdom of Mystic Masters. Anyone familiar with that book? It's a Rosicrucian book, of course, Sandra. You should be up here teaching, Sandra. I'm telling you. But anyway, this really hits the nail on the head. So it's not. This is another thing that makes me think that ufology is a shamanic tradition now, because all spiritual traditions recommend this. And I would definitely recommend it for ufology. Even if you just want to stay on the material level, that's fine. In my opinion, you're still shamanically involved in exploring who you are through ufology. So anyway, those that want to develop and really try soon outdistance their fellows and come earlier to a true understanding of life. I can attest to this. I grew up as a soccer player, growing up in a soccer kind of crowd. I could only talk about this kind of stuff that I'm talking about tonight for about 5 or 10 minutes before I'd start getting making fun of, and then the next thing I know, I'd be in a situation where I'd want to fight somebody because I don't like being made fun of. But most people just loathe reading a book. I was just with my own relatives, trying to get them to read an article I'd written in Reggae Festival Guide, and they just couldn't do it. I don't know what's up. Okay, so their open minds, their intellectual curiosity, and their persistent efforts bring them eventually to a teacher who can lead them on a path to illumination and cosmic consciousness. This is definitely true for myself. I've had several really key teachers. No one is contacted by such a teacher until he is or she is trained him or herself and is ready for the disciplines involved. You have often heard, when the student is ready, the master will appear. The important word in this promise is ready. No one is ready by accident or by gift of divine providence. Get ready by training yourself, by study, by practicing certain exercises, and becoming skilled in the prescribed mental techniques. I would say the art of private contract would be one of those mental techniques. Along with this must go a better understanding of who and what you are and why you do the things you do. All of this, plus discipline and self-control, is part of the process of getting ready. So without really consciously knowing this, I think this is what has led to my book, is I was actually doing this. And this is why I see ufology as really, it's a spiritual pursuit. And I'll let you guys all make your own decision on that, but that's my take on it. And then, another thing that I think gets overlooked in ufology, there's so much, again, I was talking to Rick, and he's saying, well, I saw these sightings, and I was with a doctor, so he's a real credible witness, but don't listen to me, because I'm not a doctor. And I'm thinking, I'd rather listen to Rick. I don't care if someone's an official or whatever. I think the real info is going to come from people, the grassroots people that are out there experiencing it. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't be a doctor or that doctors aren't going to tell you the truth, but just because someone's a doctor doesn't mean they're more credible. I think that's a bunch of hooey, or any of that kind of credibility stuff. But this even goes direct down to our own instruments. Robert Anton Wilson, God bless this guy. I love this guy. He's one of my heroes. Anyone ever seen Robert Anton Wilson speak or heard him speak? No? What a genius this guy is. Cosmic Trigger Trilogy, Illuminatus Trilogy, Schrodinger's Cat, none of that? Yeah, there you go. Okay, so in quantum psychology, he goes into the reality tunnel. The emic realities is one of the things he talks about, and how we all create our own little reality tunnels. That's a lens by which we view the world. It's biased, and so we have cultural bias as well. And even our instruments are biased. And I was trying to find maybe a better quote that maybe is more technical to say why this is true, but this is the best one I could find at the time. We thought we could escape the relativity and uncertainty of sense organs by building smart instruments, but now we have discovered the relativity of the instruments themselves. They're just extensions of us, so by definition they're going to be biased. Sorry I don't have a better example of how that's true, other than atomic clocks will measure time slightly differently under different gravitational situations. So nothing is really set in stone. It depends on perspective. Einstein was right, at least in terms of relativity. And of course, Bruce Cathey says that Einstein hit his unified equation. But in the end, because we're in a magical universe, because we are ruled by symbols, and because symbols can be imbued with any kind of energy, and symbols can have multiple meanings, I think it's very hard to know something, anything. It's hard to know something. How do you know something? And so I find this especially pertinent in ufology, when there's many, many conflicting stories. Anyone ever see Stanton Friedman debate Michael Shermer on Larry King? They've had several debates. And each side's got experts, and each experts know what they're going to do, and it's just a bunch of arguing back and forth, and God, I'm just tired of that crap myself. So again, why I wrote the book, so you could just go out and do it yourself. But this is an example of how I see ufology and how I see life. We can't really know anything, or it's very difficult to know something, so you can only inch toward the truth. This is like a calculus diagram, a parabola with a line tangent touching in one point. Now, philosophically, we know it touches on a point, but we can't actually go to that point. It's too small. But if you use calculus in the derivative, you can calculate along the curve ever so closely so that when you pull back out into this reality, it's good, like in, say, in machinery, precision machinery. I think ufology in life is like that. We don't really know, and it's so hard to know what the symbols mean, how to interpret them. So what we can do is we can keep getting closer and closer on that curve to that point. New things will come, new subjects we'll study, and then we'll get more chances to cross-reference and identify patterns. And those patterns will all indicate a certain outcome. It doesn't prove the outcome, but it indicates it. And so I think that's about the best we can do, really, in life and in ufology, is to identify the patterns that indicate what we think is real. And so that's where we have society. It's consensus reality. We've all agreed that certain things are certain things, and that's how we go by it. But do we really know that they're those things? I don't think we do. Philosophically, it's a really sticky area. Of course, ufology is very sticky. But so that's what I did just in college. I just started cross-referencing stuff. And I got out and I was doing my music articles, and I would go home at night and I'd start reading this stuff and just start cross-referencing stuff. So Chapter 9, I cross-referenced Graham Hancock and Zecharia Sitchin. Hancock's got a new book out. I wish he'd quit writing so he'd leave stuff for me to write about. His new book's called Soul Eaters. That's right where I'm going for the next thing. Sucker. Anyway, he had not very good things to say about Sitchin in Underworld. Kind of criticized him for doing the alien thing. Well, when I read both sets of material, I kind of find them parallel to each other. They kind of reflect each other. And I'll let you guys decide for yourself, but they're really talking about the same thing. Ancient civilizations that were here on Earth that we've lost touch with. And for a variety of reasons we've lost knowledge of, and lost knowledge of ourselves. And you move through the Hancock material, who's more, we'll say, credible, because I think you'll understand what I mean by that. Even though Sitchin stuff, you just got to start cross-referencing Sitchin stuff, and I think there's plenty of validity to his material as well. But then, of course, Jordan Maxwell. Anyone here familiar with Jordan Maxwell? Oh, God, he's one of my favorites. What a great man he is. He's embroiled in a bit of controversy right now. I'm not exactly sure what's going on with that. But, so what if his name is Russell Pine? This is all entertainment, right? Many actors and entertainers have different names. And it's essentially a different face. So you can have a different persona. This is a thing in magic that's a classic. It's a fundamental. But I do a thing on Jordan with the Magic of Society, and then I cross-reference, let's see, do I say it down here? Ooh, maybe I don't have the Hollywood. No, I do have the Hollywood one. Okay, well anyway, so I crossed Bruce Caffey with Jordan's idea that the Druids founded Hollywood because it was on a key ley line. And so I'll get to that map here at the end of the talk. Then I talk about David Icke, and cross David Icke with Nicholas de Vere. Anyone hear of Prince Nicholas? No? He's the guy he wrote, I forget what the book's called, but he claimed co-ownership with Lawrence Gardner of one of his first books. And there's a big lawsuit. Well, anyway, de Vere, the House of Anjou, claims that vampires came from an offshoots of the Anunnaki, and what they would do is they would stay up late at night with the dragon lady, the redhead, green-eyed lady, and they would bring her to orgasm and then drink her orgasm. And supposedly that orgasm had melatonin and some other things in it. And it would give these disciples long life, super strength, clairvoyance, that kind of thing. And it would make their skin really pale. And so, according to de Vere, that led to the whole vampire legend. Pretty interesting stuff. Anyway, I was told to stay away from this guy, so I immediately went out and bought the book. Matter of fact, Duncan Rhodes of Nexus told me stay away from the guy. So, I don't know what's up with Duncan. Anyway, I try to stay open to everything, because people feed you full of crap all the time, so you got to go look for yourself. Anyone familiar with Michael Tsarian? God, I love that guy. Great guy. Great book, Atlantis, Alien Visitation and Genetic Manipulation. There's no other book like it. He has annotated sections in there. No one does that, but there's loads of information in there. Anyway, I cross him with some of the religious Catholic stuff and the origins of evil, and that's turned out to me to be one of my most fascinating pieces. You can find that article on the net. I wrote it for Magical Blend and their website that they had before they went under. And of course, Nancy Red Star, crossing her with just modern society. Richard Hoagland kind of stuff a little bit in there. What do the native traditions all say? They all say the same thing, that UFOs are a reflection of us. So if we're warlike and aggressive, that's what we're going to get. And if the Greada Treaty is real, and Eisenhower met with gray aliens on the tarmac in 53 or 54 at Wright-Patterson, then I think that's true. We've attracted a species that is dominant to us and don't really care about us. But I think through fear, he contracted on all of our behalves without our permission. And so how do we get out of that contract? Steve was mentioning abductions earlier, about how people are taken against their will. That's a great question, man. If it's by contract, did we agree on a soul level to be participate in this thing and we just don't remember, because that's part of the terms of your contract, not to remember? Or are these beings in dishonor? Or have they been misled by our leader who gave the Greys the impression that we were on board with them? Okay? Either way, I think as independent individual beings, we have a right to say no and to make our own contracts. And if we've been in a contract without full disclosure, we can get out of it. How do you do that? You have to consult different magical traditions for different protocols, how to repel some of this kind of stuff. And this gets into demonology and Aleister Crowley and all kinds of really interesting stuff that I think is interesting, actually, but that's for a different talk. And then, of course, okay, there's my Bruce Cathy, Jordan Maxwell cross. And Bruce Cathy and Rod Maupin have designed the only ley line computer mapping program that I know is in existence. So I cannot cross Bruce Cathy with enough people. I'm crossing him with everybody. So Jordan says there's a ley line in Hollywood. I'll get to that map in a minute. There's one running right down the middle of it, and all kinds of cool stuff is on it. And of course, you can see at the end, I'm crossing Cathy with a bunch of people. But I cross Jose Arguelles with Ray Kurzweil. Anyone know who Ray Kurzweil is? He also wrote a book called Age of Spiritual Machines. Have you read that? And Moore's Law. And Moore's Law predicts that by like 2050, machines will be sentient based on how the pattern is going. And so what he maintains is that humans could not evolve fast enough on their own. So they create external things to evolve for them. And that's literally what a computer is, an extension of our own brain. What I found interesting was that as Jose Arguelles is arguing to save the biosphere and how the technosphere has been created as a bubble inside the biosphere that operates outside of natural time, Ray Kurzweil is making the case that we're headed towards a totally mechanized society. And Arguelles says, yes, if we don't get out of 1260 time ratio, that literally is from the Anunnaki, he maintains, and get back to natural time, that's exactly where we're going. We're going towards the Borg. We're going to be a Borg society. Anyway, that's probably my favorite chapter. Of course, I get into William Henry's idea of a Holy Grail and cross that with all the classical Holy Grail stuff. People familiar with Leonard Horowitz? Great guy. He's doing some interesting work now dealing with this whole Satanism thing. Very sticky situation, that is. But he maintains that Merck ritually creates diseases to kill people. And so I'll get to that map in just a minute. We did a ley line map of Merck, and I published that in UFO magazine. Of course, in Richard Hoagland HD Physics, they're talking about the same things. Hoagland's got the James Clerk Maxwell philosophy that he learned from Thomas Bearden, and that whole string of scholars that led up to that. If that's true, we've had a unified field equation since 1895, brought to you by James Clerk Maxwell. It's been swept under the rug. And then, of course, J.J. and Desiree Hurtak. Anyone read The Keys of Enoch? God, that book was just a marathon. But throughout the book is riddled this light harmonic terminology. And it's the same terminology Cathy uses when he unveils his light harmonic math, which has not been accepted by academia, but yet when he does the same procedures over, he gets these results that it's just amazing. He's got 3 unified equations, And he's shown that there are no universal constants, that everything can change, including gravity and the speed of light. So anyway, that's the basic first book. That's kind of how I got started after years of article writing. And cross-referencing, that's the big thing. Cross-referencing and pattern recognition. You guys are familiar with Wendell Stevens? Has he spoken here before? I would think he had. I love that guy. Man, he's been so gracious with his time. But this is what cross-referencing will do. This is in 1984. This is the earliest UFO abductee traits comparison that I've been able to find. There may be one earlier, but I haven't found it. UFO abductees are basically honest and sincere with his friends. They're trustworthy and reliable. They're dedicated workers, seek no recognition, seeks no honors. They're reliable, family people. They say family man. Most of the abductees I know are women. But hey, he's from the 70s. It was a different culture. They can be quite patriotic. They care about their society. I don't really see a lot of people really caring about society nowadays, and I don't blame them because we're being led down the wrong path. He's not religious. He respects existence at all levels. Does not take the life of a lesser creature. Universal law. But then again, they're not highly educated, according to this early one. Now, in the book, I put the most recent one I could find by Nadine Lalich. Anyone familiar with Nadine? I know. No? Sandra? No? My God, okay. Nadine Lalich, okay. She's got like 60 different things down here. And she puts them in a questionnaire. But anyway, cross-referencing. So when I was sitting in my room thinking I'm just this little guy just reading books, and I'm cross-referencing, and I see one of the biggest names in ufology, and they're doing the same thing, wow, did I feel empowered. I'm like, wow, maybe I could do this stuff too. Wow, this is fun. That's all you got to do, just start cross-referencing stuff, and then patterns come out. What a revelation. So this is one of the little things that I kind of work on and keep on the back burner. Anyone ever come across these little round things before and kind of try to cross them with other cases and see what comes up? There's the Venusian ships up there from some of the Adamski photographs, alleged real photographs, we'll say. And you see the Nazi ones below, and they got these little bubbles down there at the bottom. What's going on there? Here's a Pleiadian ship, a pencil drawing of a Pleiadian ship from the Billy Myers case. The best shot I could see of is on the cover of that coffee table book, but it's got these round bulbs on the bottom. In Message from the Pleiades, one of the Wendell Stevens books about the Billy Meyer case, excuse me, I think that's the name of the book. There's like 6 books on the Billy Meyer case. He even ties the Pleiadians to the reticulans, which Wendell's written a bunch of books about. So, you know, what's going on here? This is really simple stuff, but what's going on? What does this say? Is there a dealership out there where they all go buy the UFOs? Maybe? I don't know. But it implies that there's similar technology out there that maybe a wide variety of species have come to the conclusion that this is the best way to go about traveling to this place. What I also find interesting is there's a scholar by the name of William Lynn. Anyone familiar with William Lynn? He wrote the book Space Aliens from the Pentagon. And in it he says a lot of wild stuff. But his hypothesis is that there are no aliens and that all the UFOs are really stolen Nikola Tesla equipment that they're trying to experiment with and develop. And when you see stuff like this across, say, 4 different, if you add the reticulans in, Venusians, the Nazis, the Pleiadians, and the reticulans, maybe he's right. I don't know, it's kind of weird, but this is the kind of stuff you get with cross-referencing. I can't recommend that enough. It's so simple to do. You have so much fun doing it. But, okay, cross-referencing. Here's my Hollywood ley line map. This is in the book Song in Your Heart, Story of the Search for the Lost Note. You see, you go over the hills. There's Disney Studios, NBC, Warner Brothers. A couple cemeteries, if you're familiar with ley line research. Cemeteries, tree groves, water are often found on ley lines. Again, you see the Great Western Forum down there. Jordan Maxwell likes to say that sports is a metaphor for society. You have a handful of people playing the game, and everyone else is sitting on their ass. Perfect, right? Here's a close-up. You got Scientology down there. L. Ron Hubbard. There's a whole lecture waiting to happen right there. Grauman's Chinese Theater. More cemeteries down there. You got the Hollywood signs just off the the ley line. You go up over the hill, you see the cemeteries. Look where it cuts through. Disney Studios. So maybe that Dan Brown book wasn't total fiction. He was saying Walt Disney was an Illuminati. Maybe he knew something we didn't, but does it prove Jordan was right? No. But it sure, I think we're moving along that curve that maybe he is, because there's the ley line right down Hollywood, just like he said that the Druids came there for. Here's my Merck Lab ley line map, also available in the book, Song in Your Heart. Leonard Horowitz says that SARS was created here, and that possibly AIDS and Ebola. And he predicted a while back that the bird flu stuff was going to be made here. But look at the shape of that building. Six-sided. Structured water works best with pentagons and hexagons, five-sided and six-sided structures. And then you have a building that's would seem to be ritually developed. And it looks like a little octopus or something, but very close to a ley line. And so does it prove anything? No, but it kind of shows that maybe Len kind of knows what he's talking about. Maybe there is some indication that the ritual creation of diseases is going on for population control. And are we familiar with why that happens? The Club of Rome commissioned a study from, I think it was Harvard or Yale, and to find out what to do about the crisis on the earth with the limited supplies, limited resources, and the report said, well, you kill 80% of the people and you'll be fine. So my take is that's what's happening to us right now. You know, I was a little disappointed. The clouds were a little up yesterday when I was hanging out in Gardena with my family because I couldn't see the chemtrails. In Chico, we get to see chemtrails all day long. So are you guys getting left out? Are they trying to save you guys? Or is there just enough smog down here they figure they don't need to do it? Every other day? Is that what it is? I was on an off day? Okay. They're dousing us up in Chico. Crops are going bad all over, coming up with weird funguses, and anyway, so here's my Montauk map. This is my favorite map. Montauk is a highly controversial issue. I think the first 4 books of the Montauk series are some of the best UFO books written. I don't know if they're true or not, but it's great reading. So how can you cross-reference some of that stuff? These guys make outrageous claims. And so Stuart Swerdlow, I've studied his stuff extensively. I recommend his stuff. His is like a non-cultural based shamanic tradition. He calls it hyperspace language. But so how do you cross-reference some of that stuff, from Montauk? So I thought, well, I'll throw a ley line map down on and see what they're saying. Well, and I think it's the Pyramids of Montauk. It's the 3rd book. The Indians say that Turtle Bay, you see that on the far right, is the center of the universe. And it's, within a mile or two of the ley line power point crossing. And then, of course, you see Camp Hero. That whole blank space there is the military base. And you see the military housing down on the bottom towards where the pyramids start. And the pyramids aren't all right there, but they stretch up and down the coast all the way up to Turtle Bay. There was one picture of them in the book. Has anyone ever read that book? Seen that picture of they're very small mounds, but they're distinct mounds. And, you talk to Stuart and he says, well, right off the coast there is Atlantis. And I haven't crossed this or checked this out, but he says that fishermen will occasionally report seeing metallic structures down off the coast. Pretty fascinating stuff. So anyway, so there's the ley line map of Montauk. So a lot of UFO reports come out of Montauk. A lot of strange phenomena, weird creatures squash up on the shore, weird mermaids. You can YouTube some weird Montauk creatures that get washed up. So a lot of strange stuff going on there, and you see that little tiny piece of island's got some ley lines going across it. So does that prove anything? No. It's fun to look at, speculate. And cross-referencing is just loads of fun. So now back to the UFO Hunter's Guide. Doing that book, I came across some profound patterns. What are UFOs? All of the above. They are metallic craft from other planets, I think. But I also think it's possible that there's metallic craft from inside the Earth. I also think it's possible metallic craft from other dimensions, as well as ethereal craft from other dimensions, or maybe other galaxies, or maybe ethereal craft from right under our nose somewhere here that maybe technically not a different dimension, but it's outside of our awareness. There's living beings in the atmosphere, which I think are mistaken for alien craft. Rods. Has anyone ever filmed rods? Anyone know what rods are? I've actually filmed rods. It was pretty neat. I camped on the foot of a dry waterfall at Table Mountain in Orville, and I just set the camera right looking up the wall and then away from the sun, and as the sky fishing technique dictates. And it took about 20 minutes of watching in the Chico State Media Lab, and a rod came right down the face of it and just took a 90-degree angle and shot off. And I just lit up when I actually did that myself. That made me feel like I could just go out and do this stuff myself, you know? So all of the above. The altruistic pattern, I'll skip to 3 first before I get to the other one. The altruistic theme definitely holds, especially with my UFO and Bigfoot case that I'm working on. It seems to be about, we're the issue. Why don't they land and just talk to us? Why don't they contact all of us consciously? I think we're the issue. We haven't got our house in order. You know, we need things like attorneys and governments to handle our affairs that we should be handling ourselves. And so the big one, though, that I think is the big one, is that the Anunnaki appear to be returning. There's 4 categories where I hold up to go along this curve that maybe this is true. Of course, abduction testimony. Steve mentioned David Jacobs earlier. What a book that is, The Threat. It's kind of scary. But we may be being genetically altered to be replaced or conquered, depending on how you look at it. And it seems to be a common theme with abductees. I have a few abductees that I'm talking to, but I don't call those official cases yet, because I really try to treat them more as friends. Because as soon as stuff gets official, you know, people tend to clam up or get a little more nervous. And so I won't write about these people until they give me permission. But until then, we're just friends. And as friends, you get bestowed a lot deeper information. So I'd recommend that for anybody. Don't ever tell anyone you're doing an investigation necessarily, unless you're officially doing one. Just ask questions like a friend and a human, a fellow human, and watch people open up. But then don't screw their trust. If you gain their trust, keep it. Keep their secrets until they give you permission. And that's how you stay in honor. Anyone familiar with Steve Canada? Not a very well-known crop circle guy, but he's written, like 20-something books about the crop circles in England, and he says that they're all telling us that the Anunnaki are returning. And there's a wide variety of things that he points to. I'll let you go check his books out, because I could talk about that for a long time. But then it's all, the 12th planet is prophesied to return, both in the Torah and the Bible. And there's other traditions that speak of distant satellites. Wormwood in the Christian tradition would be one example. And then what I like to look at is craft markings. It's a subject that is, I think, little paid attention to, because it's symbols. And you don't really know a lot about symbols because they can mean anything. It just depends what do the craft makers mean by the symbols. But so I threw some things together here. There's the symbols from the Bent Waters. This is the Lonnie Zamora case. It's an arch with an arrow in it on top of a flat line. And then, of course, the cross on the Nazi stuff can easily be interpreted as a planet of the crossing, which is how the Sumerians used the cross, one of the ways in which. You go back up to the top, and this symbol right here can be interpreted as the number 60 in Sanskrit, which is the ranking of Enlil. If any of you are familiar with the 12 planet stuff, Enlil is the head alien, the head Anunnaki that supposedly sent the expedition to Earth originally, which gave rise to our societies. And so, breaking down the middle symbol, you can interpret it in a very warlike way with an arrow in the arch. Now, the arch could mean a brotherhood, but it can also mean protection. And so then you have a weapon with protection, and that kind of implies aggression, which, of course, if you've read the 12 planets stuff, the Anunnaki are very aggressive. So anyway, does that mean they're returning? No, but I think we're inching along that curve towards And if any of you have paid attention to the new YouTube stuff on what people think is Nibiru, that's some compelling stuff. It's the internet stuff. So now let's get to the goods. This is what I really want. Anyone know about Kiwani Lapsaritis? Okay. What a great guy this is. He's been ridiculed and scorned on levels that only a ufologist or maybe a martyr can talk about. He's had his work stolen. He gets laughed at. Famous Bigfoot researchers make fun of him because they get the TV time and he doesn't. So he doesn't really have too much of a voice. But when I met him in 2007 at the Bay Area UFO Expo, I asked him if he wanted to do an interview for my DVD series, and he said, "Interview, huh?" I'm just kind of looking at him. He says, okay, they said I can do it, okay. So give me a few minutes to set up, and so I gave him a few minutes, came back. He did a great interview. I wish I had those to sell. It's on my volume 2, that segment. It's one of the best segments on the double disc set. Great interview. At the end, he said, my Sasquatch guys are saying that you were invited up to possibly have a contact experience. Wing, jaw hits the floor. Of course I'm going, I don't know if it's real. I'm just there trying to interview and learn stuff. So I just thought, what an opportunity. So I went up to Kiwani's house in Central Washington in 2009, summer 2009. I made it up there. It took me a while to get my finances going. I've had trouble with the law and the DMV and stuff, so I've had to kind of work through that. But this is a second book, Sasquatch People and Their Interdimensional Connection. And my first UFO report, really, my article that I'm writing for Paranormal Magazine will be out in the next issue. And this is the cover that was sent to me by Brian Allen, the editor. So, but basically, what's gone on, in a nutshell, well, I'll just start at the beginning. He invites me up. We go out to dinner. He says I probably should have a drink or two if I felt nervous at all. So I took him up on it. I don't drink very much, so I had a couple quick scotches. It's fermented a little different, so it doesn't make me react. We get to his house. It's around 11 o'clock. It's pitch black out. He has neighbors, but it's really jungly out. It's really dense jungle in between the houses. And we're sitting on his porch, and didn't take very long, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, and this thing starts hooting at us. Loud, like an owl, but way more powerful. And I didn't see it, so I'll stay open to it. Maybe it was an owl, but if it was an owl, it was like a 6-foot owl. Because I felt like I was being blown away by the sound. And it hooted at us three times. So I'm blown away. Kawani's saying, God, I wish I could see the look on your face right now. I'm like, I'm glad you can't, because I'm gripping the chair. And I'm a pretty big guy. And it takes a lot to scare me. I was genuinely scared. But I did not run. This thing goes around the back of the house and hoots 3 more times. And I'm like, wow, this is incredible. And then it goes to a third spot and does it 3 times. Magic, right there. They're welcoming me. Initiation. Kiwani says they're just letting you know that they're there and that they know you're here. Okay, great. I did not put my tent up outside that night. Too scared. I asked him very kindly, can I please sleep in your house? He has a very small house. He understood and let me. That night, I'm sleeping on my stomach, and I feel something go down the back of my calf. And he had warned me that I could see something at night. Well, I was too afraid to turn around and look. I admit, I was too afraid to turn around and look. And I've done a bunch of drugs, so I know what a hallucination is. This was not a hallucination, okay? So, the next morning, I set up my tent, and over the next 2 nights, I hear hoots throughout the night. On one morning in particular, I heard several hoots from distances. They were like communicating over this little valley that we're in. And I just laid in my sleeping bag, just amazed that this was going on. But all kinds of little stuff would happen. I'd hear little footsteps going outside my tent. I'd hear breathing. I've been up there 3 times, so again, that's probably no coincidence. Each time I was up there for 3 nights. I didn't plan that, but looking back, that's kind of weird. The last time I was up there was in October of 2011. It was in a rainstorm, and we just watched that British opera guy. Who's that guy? Boy, he thinks he is the talk of the walk. All these like debutante girls are in the audience just gone at him. It's just incredible to watch. Anyway, we go outside. It's pouring rain out, and all of a sudden a massive explosion happens. Sound. Man, a diesel truck just hit another diesel truck, or two cranes just collapsed, or a Concorde jet just crashed right in front of us. And at that stage, I knew that was them just testing me. They had been testing me for my fear the whole time. And so what I've come to learn is that just like if you're around a skittish animal, you reach down to pet a little dog or something that's skittish, and it cowers away from you. Well, you kind of don't want to be around that dog very much, You don't have anything against it, but it's kind of the wrong energy. Well, that's kind of how the Sasquatch see us. They see us as skittish and not able to hold the right thoughts in our head. And over my 3 trips, it's been a series of them, or whatever they are, trying to startle me and whether or not I react. And gosh, this is the same thing that I use in court, to not be intimidated by the judge, because that's what the judge is trying to do, is throw you off center. And so if it's true that these are Sasquatch that I'm experiencing, they are trying to show me that I am riddled with fear. And being honest with myself, I look at my life and they're right. I'm afraid to be pulled over. I'm afraid to get beaten up by the cops. I'm afraid to get my car impounded again. I'm afraid that the IRS will come after me if I don't kiss their little. I'm afraid to not have money to pay the bills. I'm afraid to say the wrong thing at work so I get fired and then I'm not going to pay the bills. And then so I began to realize, wow, I think a lot of us live with that kind of stuff, and we think it's normal because we're just born into this society, and our loving parents are there to nurture us, and everything's beautiful, right? So we don't really take it like that. And over time, we add up these things and just continue on. Well, I think the Sasquatch was showing me that's what the deal was. So after that explosion that night, I went to bed. I knew it was an explosion. I knew it was them testing me. They did it one more time in the middle of the night. They flicked the top of my tent with a fingernail or a stick or something. It just right in the middle of the night. I mean, even though it was raining out, I could hear someone where I'm at. You could hear something around you walk up, and no sound or anything. So that morning, I got my first good report, and Kiwani said that they told him that I had a good heart, that I was okay. So it took 3 years and literally 9 days completion to get that response. Now, Kiwani's had some personal issues, so I didn't go back up this year, although I've been just hounding them to let me go back up because I think I've broken through. Maybe they'll let me see them. That's got to wait. But for now, the first report's coming out. There's some other things in there that I didn't just say, so you can still read it, get something out of it. But that's it. That's my first report. And basically, a UFO Hunter's Guide was written so that people can go out and do the stuff themselves. And I think you guys understand that already, because that's why you guys are here. And so I thank you all for showing up tonight. I really appreciate it. And please buy a book if you can. That's it.